I was watching my brand new backup generator purr like a contented lion in my backyard when Patricia from the HOA showed up uninvited, clipboard in hand. And that was the moment I knew my peaceful Saturday afternoon in Phoenix, Arizona, was about to go straight to hell. "Xavier Hamilton," she called out, her voice dripping with that particular brand of false sweetness that always preceded unreasonable demands. "We need to have a little chat about your recent purchase." I turned away from my beautiful 35-kilowatt Generac generator, which had cost me nearly $15,000 after installation. Living in Phoenix meant dealing with extreme summer heat, and power outages could be deadly. This generator could run my entire house, including the air conditioning, for weeks if needed. It was an investment in safety, comfort, and peace of mind. "Patricia," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "what can I do for you?" Patricia Henderson was the president of our HOA, a position she had held for 6 consecutive years through a combination of intimidation and the fact that nobody else wanted to deal with the headache. She was 52, always wore pastel-colored cardigans regardless of the Arizona heat, and had perfectly styled blonde hair that never moved even in the wind. Her husband worked for some tech company, her kids were grown and gone, and she had made micromanaging the neighborhood her entire personality. "The board has been discussing your generator," she said, glancing at her clipboard with practiced importance. "It is quite impressive. We have been organizing some community events this summer, and we realized that having reliable backup power would be essential for safety reasons." "Okay," I said slowly, sensing where this was going but hoping I was wrong. "We would like to use your generator for our upcoming Summer Spectacular event on July 15th, she continued. "It is a community celebration, after all, and we all need to contribute to make our neighborhood special." I blinked at her. "You want to borrow my $15,000 generator?" "Not borrow exactly," Patricia said, her smile tightening. "As a resident of Sunset Valley Estates, you have certain obligations to support community activities. The HOA charter, which you agreed to when you purchased your property, includes provisions for shared resources during community events." "I have read the HOA charter pretty thoroughly," I said. "I do not remember anything about lending out personal property." Patricia flipped through several pages on her clipboard with exaggerated movements. "Section 12, subsection 4, paragraph 3. Residents are expected to support community welfare and contribute resources when reasonable and necessary for organized HOA functions. That section is about maintaining your lawn and not being a nuisance," I said. "It has nothing to do with lending out expensive equipment." "The board interprets it more broadly," Patricia said, her fake smile disappearing entirely. "This is for the good of the community, Xavier. Do not be selfish about this." "Selfish? I just spent $15,000 on emergency equipment to protect my family. How is that selfish?" "The event is only for 6 hours," she said. "We need power for the sound system, lights, and food vendors. The park does not have adequate electrical outlets, and renting a generator commercially would cost the HOA nearly $2,000. It makes much more sense to use your generator, which would just be sitting here anyway." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "Patricia, generators require proper operation. They need to be monitored, refueled, and maintained. Insurance and liability are concerns. What happens if something goes wrong? What if there is an actual emergency here at my house while you have my generator?" "We would be very careful," she said dismissively. "And you could operate it yourself at the event if you are so concerned. Consider it your volunteer contribution this year." "I already volunteer," I said. "I helped organize the Neighborhood Watch program last spring." "That was last year," Patricia said. This year. The summer spectacular is in 2 weeks. I will send you the details about when we need the generator delivered to Sunset Valley Park." "I am not agreeing to this," I said firmly. Patricia's eyes went cold. "I really hope you will reconsider, Xavier. The board takes note of residents who do not support community initiatives. It can affect things like permit approvals, covenant enforcement flexibility, and your standing in the neighborhood." "Are you threatening me?" "I am explaining how communities work," she said. "We all have to get along and support each other. I will email you the event details. I trust you will do the right thing." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on my driveway, leaving me standing there with my blood pressure spiking in the 100-degree heat. My wife, Rebecca, came outside a few minutes later with 2 glasses of iced tea. I saw Patricia leave. She looked annoyed. "She wants to commandeer my generator for an HOA event," I said, gratefully accepting the cold drink. Rebecca's eyebrows shot up. "Your generator? The one we just installed, the very same." "Apparently, I have a community obligation to provide them with free power and equipment." "Can she actually force you to do that?" "I do not think so, but she made some veiled threats about making our lives difficult with the HOA. I sipped my tea and stared at the generator. It really was a beautiful piece of equipment, all industrial gray steel and German engineering through an American company. It had cost more than my first car. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to look very carefully at our HOA charter and probably call a lawyer," I said. "Because I am definitely not handing over my generator to Patricia and her minions." That evening, I sat in my home office reviewing every page of the HOA charter, bylaws, and covenant agreements. The document was 73 pages of legal language that mostly dealt with fence heights, paint colors, and lawn maintenance requirements. The section Patricia had referenced was indeed about community support, but it was clearly intended to cover things like maintaining your property and not creating disturbances. Nothing in any of the documents gave the HOA authority to demand use of personal property. The next morning, I called my buddy Tyler, who was a real estate attorney in Scottsdale. We had gone to Arizona State University together and stayed close over the years. "Xavier, good to hear from you," Tyler said when he picked up. "What is going on?" I explained the situation with Patricia and the generator. Tyler listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. "She has absolutely no legal standing," Tyler said once I finished. "HOA agreements give them authority over property use, modifications, and community rules. They cannot commandeer personal property for events. That is completely outside their scope." That is what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. "If she pushes this, tell her to have the HOA's lawyer contact you directly. That will shut it down fast because any lawyer will tell them the same thing I just told you. They would be opening themselves up to massive liability if anything happened to your generator." She also made some vague threats about making things difficult for me. "Document everything," Tyler advised. "Save emails, record conversations if Arizona's single-party consent law applies. Keep notes with dates and times. If she retaliates against you for refusing an unreasonable demand, that is grounds for legal action against the HOA itself." I felt better after talking to Tyler. I sent Patricia a polite email that afternoon declining to provide my generator for the event, citing liability concerns and the lack of any charter provision requiring it. I kept the tone professional and brief. Her response came within an hour. "Xavier, I am very disappointed in your lack of community spirit. The board will be discussing this matter at our next meeting on Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. at the community center. Your attendance would be appreciated so we can resolve this amicably." It was not a request, despite the polite wording. This was Patricia rallying her board to pressure me. Tuesday evening arrived hot and sticky, even by Phoenix standards. The community center was a modest building at the entrance to Sunset Valley Estates, with a small meeting room that held about 30 folding chairs. When I arrived at 6:55, about a dozen residents were already there, along with the 4 board members besides Patricia. The board consisted of Margaret, a retired teacher who usually went along with whatever Patricia wanted; Robert, who owned a plumbing business and rarely spoke; Susan, who was Patricia's best friend and biggest enabler; and David, a younger guy who had only been on the board for a year and sometimes showed signs of independent thought. Patricia called the meeting to order at exactly 7 p.m. She went through the standard agenda items, approving previous meeting minutes, discussing a complaint about someone's mailbox color, reviewing the budget for landscaping the common areas. I sat quietly, waiting for the inevitable. "Next item," Patricia announced, her voice taking on a harder edge. "We need to discuss the upcoming summer spectacular event and some challenges we have encountered with uncooperative residents." Here we go, I thought. As many of you know, our summer spectacular is our biggest community event of the year, Patricia continued. We have food vendors, live music, activities for children, and we expect over 300 attendees from our neighborhood and surrounding areas. However, Sunset Valley Park has very limited electrical infrastructure, and we need backup power to ensure a successful and safe event. She paused dramatically, looking around the room. Several residents nodded along, not yet understanding where this was going. One of our residents recently installed a very expensive, very powerful backup generator. When I politely asked if he would support the community by allowing us to use this generator for our 6-hour event, he refused. Multiple heads turned to look at me. I kept my expression neutral. "Patricia," I said, standing up, "that is a pretty slanted version of events." "Please wait for the public comment period," Patricia said coldly. "No," I said firmly. "If you are going to misrepresent a conversation we had, I am going to correct the record right now." David, the younger board member, nodded. "That seems fair." Patricia's jaw tightened, but she gestured for me to continue. "Patricia came to my home uninvited and demanded to use my personal backup generator for an HOA event," I said, addressing the room. "This is a $15,000 piece of emergency equipment that I purchased to protect my family during power outages." She cited a completely unrelated section of the HOA charter to claim I had an obligation to turn over my property. When I declined, she made threats about the board making things difficult for me. "That is not what happened," Patricia said. "That is exactly what happened," I replied. "And I have no legal obligation to provide my personal property for HOA events. I checked with an attorney." Margaret raised her hand tentatively. "Xavier does have a very nice generator. Maybe we could rent it from him for a reasonable fee. That way, everyone wins." "The HOA should not have to pay for something a resident should willingly provide," Susan said immediately, backing up Patricia as expected. "Why should he willingly provide expensive equipment?" asked a voice from the back. I turned to see my neighbor, Frank Morrison, an older veteran who had lived in the neighborhood for 15 years. "I would not let the HOA borrow my tools or my truck. What makes a generator different?" "It is about community spirit," Patricia said, her voice rising slightly. "About coming together for the common good." "The common good is not the same as confiscating property," Frank said. "This is America, not Soviet Russia." A few people chuckled, but Patricia was not amused. "Let me be very clear," Patricia said, staring directly at me. "The board has certain discretionary powers regarding code enforcement. We have been very flexible with many residents about minor violations. But if someone demonstrates they do not care about community welfare, we may need to be more strict in how we apply the rules." The room went silent. That was an open threat and everyone knew it. "That sounds like retaliation," I said quietly, "and that would be illegal." "It is not retaliation to enforce rules consistently," Patricia said. "The board will take this matter under advisement. Meeting adjourned." She gathered her papers and left quickly, with Susan following. The other board members looked uncomfortable. Several residents came up to me afterward to express support, including Frank and a woman named Lisa who lived 3 streets over. "Patricia has been getting worse every year," Lisa said. "She treats this neighborhood like her personal kingdom." "Someone needs to run against her in the next election," Frank added, "but she makes it so miserable that nobody wants to deal with her." I drove home frustrated and angry. Rebecca could tell immediately when I walked in. "That bad?" she asked. "She basically threatened to weaponize code enforcement against us if I do not hand over the generator." "Can she do that?" "Legally, no. But she can make our lives annoying by nitpicking every tiny violation she can find." And that was exactly what happened. Over the next week, I received 3 violation notices. The first claimed my trash cans were visible from the street before 7 a.m. on pickup day, which was supposedly against the rules. The second said my lawn was 1 inch too tall according to HOA standards. The third claimed my house number sign was faded and needed to be replaced within 14 days. I went through each notice carefully. The trash can claim was questionable at best, since I put them out at 6:45 a.m. for a 7 a.m. pickup. The lawn height was measured at 3.2 inches when the maximum was 3 inches, which required someone to literally measure my grass with a ruler. The house number sign was slightly faded but perfectly legible. These were petty harassment, pure and simple. I documented everything, photographed the supposed violations with timestamps, and sent professional responses to each notice explaining why they were either incorrect or absurdly petty. I also forwarded everything to Tyler. "She is building a paper trail to justify further action," Tyler said when I called him. "She wants to establish a pattern of violations to potentially fine you or take more serious action. Keep responding professionally and keep records of everything." The summer spectacular was now 10 days away, and Patricia sent another email to all residents promoting the event. She made sure to mention that several selfish residents had refused to support the community, making it harder to provide a quality experience. She did not name me specifically, but several people in the neighborhood knew exactly who she meant. Then I got an interesting phone call. "Is this Xavier Hamilton?" a man asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Michael Chen. I am the president of the Riverside Meadows HOA, about 3 miles from your neighborhood. I heard through the grapevine that you have a sizable backup generator and that Patricia Henderson has been trying to bully you into letting her use it." "Word travels fast," I said. "Phoenix HOA network is smaller than you think," Michael said with a laugh. "Patricia has a reputation. She tried to poach one of our vendors last year by claiming she could get a better deal, then tried to pay them half the agreed price after the work was done." "That sounds about right." "Listen, Riverside Meadows is having our annual 4th of July celebration on July 3rd at our community park. We could really use a backup generator because our electrical system is outdated and sometimes trips during events. I would like to rent your generator from you for the day. We would pay you $1,500, provide all fuel, maintain full insurance, and have a licensed operator run it. Everything would be professional and documented." I sat back in my chair, thinking, this was interesting timing. Can I ask how you heard about my situation with Patricia? David Murray from your HOA board. He is friends with one of my board members. He thought you might appreciate an alternative option, especially since I understand Patricia is making your life difficult. She is definitely trying, I said. Look, I understand if you are not interested in renting it out at all, but if you are open to it, we would treat you and your equipment with respect, and you would make some money while helping out a different community. Plus, it would probably annoy Patricia, which is always a bonus. I laughed despite myself. Let me think about it and discuss it with my wife. Can I call you back tomorrow? Absolutely. No pressure. That evening, Rebecca and I talked through the pros and cons over dinner. The Riverside Meadows event was July 3rd, almost 2 weeks before Patricia's summer spectacular. Michael's offer was legitimate and professional, with proper insurance and compensation. It would demonstrate that I was not against helping communities. I just was not going to be bullied into it. And yes, it would absolutely infuriate Patricia. I think you should do it, Rebecca said, but make sure everything is properly documented and insured. If anything goes wrong, you do not want to be liable. I called Michael back the next morning and agreed to rent him the generator. He sent over a detailed contract that afternoon, which I had Tyler review. Everything was legitimate. They would pick up the generator on July 2nd, return it on July 4th, and pay me half upfront and half upon return. They carried a $2 million liability policy that would cover any damages or injuries. I signed the contract and returned it. Now I just had to tell Patricia. I could have kept quiet, but that felt dishonest. Instead, I sent her an email explaining that I would not be able to provide my generator for the summer spectacular, even if I had wanted to, because it would already be committed to another event on those dates. I kept the message brief and professional. Her response came within 20 minutes, and I could practically feel the rage radiating through the screen. You rented your generator to another HOA after refusing to help your own community. This is absolutely unacceptable and shows your true character. The board will be addressing this matter immediately. An emergency board meeting was called for that Thursday evening. The email notice stated the meeting would address violations of community standards and resident conduct unbecoming of Sunset Valley Estates. I arrived at the community center to find nearly 40 people there, twice the usual attendance. Word had spread, and people were curious. Patricia sat at the front table with her board, looking like a judge about to deliver a death sentence. This emergency meeting has been called to address serious concerns about a resident who has actively worked against community interests. Patricia began without preamble. Xavier Hamilton has not only refused to support our summer spectacular, but has now rented his generator to Riverside Meadows for their event, directly undermining our community. How is helping another community undermining this one? Frank called out. It shows where his priorities lie, Susan answered. He is willing to help strangers but not his neighbors. His neighbors, meaning the HOA board, tried to bully him into handing over expensive equipment for free, Frank said. This is ridiculous. The point is, Patricia said, raising her voice, we have rules and expectations in this community. Xavier has received multiple violation notices recently, showing a pattern of disregard for our standards. Combined with his refusal to support community events, the board is considering a formal censure and potential fines. Fines for what? I asked, standing up. For not letting you borrow my property. That is not illegal or against any HOA rule. For pattern violations, Patricia said. Your trash cans, your lawn height, your house signage, these add up. Those violations are petty harassment and you know it, I said. My trash cans were out 15 minutes before pickup. My lawn was 1 inch too tall. My house numbers are perfectly readable. You are retaliating against me for not giving in to your unreasonable demands. We enforce rules equally for all residents, Margaret said, though she sounded uncertain. Then why am I the only one receiving violation notices? I asked. I have walked this neighborhood. Linda Chen's lawn is at least 4 inches tall. The Johnsons have decorative flags that are not approved colors according to the charter. The Ramirez family has a basketball hoop in their driveway, which technically violates the recreational equipment rules. But you are not citing them, are you? Patricia's face reddened. We cannot monitor every single property every single day. But you can monitor mine with a ruler. David, the younger board member, cleared his throat. Patricia, can I speak with you privately for a moment? We are in the middle of a meeting, Patricia said. I think we need to talk. Now. David's tone was firm. Patricia looked like she wanted to refuse, but Robert and Margaret were nodding in agreement. She stood abruptly and walked out of the room with David following. Susan looked lost without Patricia there to tell her what to say. The room buzzed with conversation. Lisa leaned over from a few rows back and whispered, David told me earlier he is sick of Patricia's behavior. He might finally be standing up to her. After 10 minutes, they returned. Patricia looked furious but controlled. David looked determined. After discussion with board member David Murray, Patricia said through gritted teeth, the board has decided to table this matter pending a comprehensive review of all recent violation notices and enforcement patterns across the community. It was not an apology or an admission of wrongdoing, but it was a retreat. David must have threatened to make issues public or resign, forcing the board to back down. This meeting is adjourned, Patricia said, gathering her papers quickly and leaving before anyone could ask questions. David caught up with me in the parking lot. Xavier, I need to apologize. I have known Patricia was overstepping, but I did not realize how bad it had gotten until this situation. She has been abusing her position. I appreciate you saying something, I said. There is going to be a board election in October. I am going to run against her for president. I hope you will support me. Absolutely, I said. This neighborhood needs better leadership. Over the next few days, things were quiet. I received no new violation notices. Patricia did not contact me. I prepared my generator for rental to Riverside Meadows, ensuring it was properly maintained and ready for transport. On July 2nd, Michael Chen and 2 of his board members arrived with a proper trailer to pick up the generator. They were professional and friendly, inspecting the equipment carefully and providing me with a check for $750, the first half of the rental fee. We will take good care of this, Michael promised. And thank you for helping us out. Our community really appreciates it. Happy to help, I said. July 3rd was the Riverside Meadows 4th of July celebration. Rebecca and I decided to drive over and see how the event was going. We did not stay long, but I wanted to make sure my generator was being properly used. The event was well organized and family-friendly. My generator was set up in a secure area with a professional operator monitoring it. It was powering the sound system, lighting, and several food vendor stations. Everything was running smoothly. This is how it should be done, Rebecca said. Professional, respectful, properly insured. Michael spotted us and came over with a huge smile. Xavier, glad you stopped by. Your generator has been perfect, not a single issue. Come grab some food on us, please. We stayed for about an hour, enjoying barbecue and live music. It was a genuinely nice community event, and I felt good about helping make it possible. On July 4th, Michael's team returned my generator in perfect condition and handed me the remaining $750. The equipment had been cleaned and refueled. Michael also gave me a thank you card signed by his entire board. "If you are ever interested in renting it again, please keep us in mind," Michael said. "You made our event possible." Meanwhile, Patricia was scrambling. The summer spectacular was 11 days away, and she still had no generator. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had tried to rent one commercially, but the cost was higher than expected, and she had waited too long. Most rental companies were already booked for the busy summer season. She tried calling several other companies, including some in Tucson, but the delivery fees and rental costs were adding up to almost $3,000. The HOA budget had allocated only $1,200 for equipment rental. On July 8th, Patricia sent out an email to all residents announcing that the summer spectacular would be adjusted due to budget constraints. They would be scaling back the sound system, eliminating some of the lighting, and reducing the number of food vendors. The event would now end at 6 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. to reduce power needs. The email included a paragraph about how certain residents' lack of community support had forced these changes. My phone buzzed almost immediately. It was Frank. "She is blaming you publicly now," he said. "This is defamation." "It is not quite defamation because she did not name me," I said, "but it is definitely trying to turn the community against me. A bunch of us are drafting a response email," Frank said. "We want residents to know what really happened." "I appreciate that, but I do not want to start a neighborhood war." "Xavier, she already started it. We are just making sure people know the truth." That evening, an email went out from Frank and 8 other residents, including Lisa and David. It explained that Patricia had tried to force me to provide my personal generator for free, had threatened retaliation when I refused, had harassed me with petty violation notices, and was now attempting to blame me for event problems that were caused by her poor planning. The email was factual, well-written, and devastating to Patricia's narrative. The neighborhood erupted in discussion. Some residents had always supported Patricia and thought she ran a tight ship. Others had quietly resented her controlling behavior for years, but never spoke up. This situation brought everything to the surface. I started receiving supportive messages from neighbors I barely knew. Several people apologized for judging me without knowing the full story. A few still thought I should have just helped out the community, but they were in the minority. Patricia sent another email 2 days later, on July 10th, announcing her resignation as HOA president, effective immediately. She cited personal reasons and an increasingly hostile environment. Margaret would serve as interim president until the October elections. I was not sure I believed the resignation was real until Rebecca came home from a trip to the grocery store with news. "I ran into Susan," Rebecca said. "She told me Patricia and her husband are putting their house on the market. They are moving to Prescott." Seriously. Apparently, Patricia is humiliated and cannot stand being in the neighborhood anymore. Susan was crying in the frozen food aisle about losing her best friend. I felt a strange mix of emotions. I had not wanted to drive anyone out of the neighborhood. I just wanted to be left alone with my property. But Patricia had escalated everything through her own choices. The summer spectacular went ahead on July 15th, now under Margaret's leadership. They scaled back the event, but made it work with what they had. The turnout was lower than previous years, probably around 200 people instead of 300. But the weather was good, the food was decent, and kids still had fun. Rebecca and I attended to show community support, though I felt self-conscious the whole time. Some people were warm and friendly. Others gave me uncomfortable looks as if I had killed the event's potential. Frank came up to me at one point and said, "Ignore the judgmental people. You did nothing wrong. Patricia created this mess herself. I know, I said, but it still feels weird. Leadership matters, Frank said. We are going to make sure David wins in October. This neighborhood needs someone reasonable in charge. Over the next few months, life in Sunset Valley estates slowly returned to normal. Margaret was a much more reasonable interim president. The petty violation notices stopped. She even sent me an apology letter on behalf of the board, acknowledging that I had been treated unfairly. Patricia and her husband listed their house in early August and sold it by mid-September. I never spoke to her again. The October HOA elections came, and David ran for president against a candidate Susan put forward, a man named Gregory who was Patricia's former ally. The election became a referendum on leadership style and community values. David won with 63% of the vote. At his first meeting as president, David proposed a new policy clarifying that the HOA could not demand use of personal property from residents for any purpose. The board approved it unanimously. He also implemented a fairer system for handling violation notices, requiring photographic evidence and allowing appeals. In November, I got another call from Michael Chen at Riverside Meadows. Xavier, we are planning a holiday event in December. Any chance you would be willing to rent your generator again? Same terms as before. Sure, I said. That worked out well last time. We have also been telling other HOAs in the area about you. Several are interested in renting from you for various events. You could turn this into a side business if you wanted. That was an interesting idea. I had the equipment, and I had now proven the concept worked. Over the next few weeks, I registered a simple LLC called Hamilton Power Solutions and created basic rental contracts based on what Michael had used. I set rates at $1,200 per day, with proof of insurance required. By December, I had rented the generator 3 times to different communities for events. The income was covering the cost of the generator itself, and I was building a small but steady side business. The irony was not lost on me. Patricia's attempt to take my generator for free had accidentally led to me creating a profitable rental business. In January, David approached me about Sunset Valley Estates potentially renting the generator for the upcoming spring festival. We would pay your standard rate, of course, David said. And I want to make sure you know there is no pressure, but if you are open to it, we would love to have reliable power for the event. Let me think about it, I said. I discussed it with Rebecca that evening. She laughed when I told her. After everything that happened, they want to rent from you now. Different leadership makes a difference, I said. David is nothing like Patricia. Are you going to do it? I think so. I do not have any grudge against the community, just against how Patricia treated people. I called David the next day and agreed to rent the generator for the spring festival. We signed the same professional contract I used with other communities. Everything was handled properly and respectfully. The spring festival in April was a success. My generator performed perfectly. The event ran smoothly with good power. I made $1,200 and got thank you notes from several board members and residents. Over time, people forgot about the drama from the previous summer. New families moved into the neighborhood, including into Patricia's old house. The new neighbors were a young couple with 2 kids who were friendly and easygoing. David proved to be an excellent HOA president, focused on reasonable rules and good communication. He got re-elected the following October without opposition. My generator rental business continued to grow slowly. I was not getting rich, but I was booking events regularly throughout the year. I eventually bought a second, smaller generator to expand my inventory. The equipment paid for itself within 2 years, and everything after that was profit. Looking back on the whole situation, it taught me several lessons. First, HOA leadership matters enormously. One person with too much power and the wrong personality can make life miserable. Second, standing up to bullies is important, even when it is uncomfortable. If I had just given in to Patricia's demands, she would have continued that behavior with me and others. Third, sometimes conflict leads to unexpected opportunities. On a warm evening in May, nearly 2 years after the original confrontation, I was doing maintenance on my generators in the garage when Frank walked over. "Need any help?" he asked. "Just routine stuff," I said, "making sure everything is ready for wedding season. Lots of outdoor events coming up." "I have been meaning to tell you," Frank said. "You handled that whole situation with Patricia with a lot of class. A lot of guys would have gotten angry and made things worse. You stayed professional the whole time." "I got pretty frustrated," I admitted. But Tyler, my attorney friend, kept reminding me to document everything and stay calm. That was good advice. "Patricia sent Susan a Christmas card from Prescott," Frank said. "Apparently, she is on the HOA board there now." "Of course she is," I said with a laugh. "Some people never change." "Yeah, but at least she is not our problem anymore," Frank said. We chatted for a bit longer about neighborhood news, upcoming events, and community improvements David was planning. Eventually, Frank headed home, and I finished my maintenance work. Rebecca came out with a beer for me as I was putting away tools. "Another successful day in the generator empire?" she asked. "Business is good," I said. "Got 3 rentals booked for June already." Who knew that standing up to an unreasonable HOA president would turn into a business opportunity? "Life is weird that way," I said. We sat on the back patio, enjoying the cooling evening air and the quiet of the neighborhood. The generator sat nearby, ready for the next rental. It was just a machine, a practical tool for providing backup power. But it had become a symbol of something more important. It represented the right to use your property as you see fit. The importance of standing up to unreasonable demands. The value of professionalism over bullying. And the unexpected ways that doing the right thing can lead to positive outcomes. I never regretted buying that generator or refusing Patricia's demands. I never regretted renting it to Riverside Meadows instead of giving in to her threats. And I never looked back on that whole summer as a bad experience, despite the stress and frustration, because in the end, standing firm on principle had worked out exactly as it should have. Patricia was gone. David was leading the community well. My business was thriving. And I had learned that I could face down an intimidating bully and come out stronger on the other side. The neighborhood had learned something too. They had seen what happens when one person has too much unchecked power and how important it is to hold leaders accountable. Attendance at HOA meetings had actually increased. More people were paying attention and speaking up. The community was healthier for it. In late June, I got a call from an event planning company in Scottsdale. They had heard about my generator rental business and wanted to discuss a potential partnership for corporate events. "We run outdoor corporate gatherings all over the Phoenix area," the woman explained. "We constantly need reliable backup power. If your service is as good as we have heard, we could provide you with steady business year-round." "I would be interested in discussing that," I said. We set up a meeting for the following week. The conversation went well, and we agreed to a trial period where they would use my services for 3 events. If those went smoothly, they would make me their preferred generator rental provider. All 3 events went perfectly. By August, I was booking corporate events regularly in addition to community gatherings. The side business that started from refusing to be bullied was becoming substantial enough that I had to think seriously about expansion. I bought 2 more generators, both commercial-grade units that could handle large events. I hired Tyler's cousin, who had electrical experience, to help with deliveries, setup, and monitoring. What started as one man with 1 generator was becoming a legitimate small business. Rebecca was supportive but made me promise I would not let it take over my life. "You already have a full-time job," she reminded me. "This needs to stay manageable." She was right. I set clear boundaries about how many rentals I would accept each month and what types of events I would support. Quality over quantity. Reasonable growth over explosive expansion. By the end of that second year, Hamilton Power Solutions was generating about $30,000 in annual revenue, with about half of that being profit after expenses. It was not life-changing money, but it was a nice supplement to my regular income, and it was satisfying to build something from nothing. The third summer after the original confrontation, Sunset Valley Estates had their summer spectacular again, now under David's leadership. It was bigger and better than the scaled-back version from Patricia's final year. I rented them my largest generator, and the event was a huge success with over 400 attendees. At one point during the evening, David found me checking on the generator and shook my hand. "Thank you for supporting this. I know things got ugly a few years back, but I hope you know the community appreciates you now." "Water under the bridge," I said. "You have done a great job as president. The neighborhood is better because of your leadership." "I learned a lot from watching what not to do," David said with a smile. Patricia was a cautionary tale in how not to lead. As I looked around at families enjoying food, music, and games under the lights powered by my equipment, I felt genuinely good. This was how community should work. People coming together voluntarily, supporting each other reasonably, and respecting boundaries. Patricia had wanted to take my property without compensation and had tried to punish me when I refused. That was the path of entitlement and control. David and the new board asked respectfully, paid fairly, and treated me as a valued service provider. That was the path of mutual respect. The difference between those 2 approaches made all the difference. Later that evening, after the event ended and I was loading the generator back onto the trailer, a younger guy I did not recognize came up to me. "Are you Xavier Hamilton?" he asked. "That is me. I am James Fletcher. I just moved into the neighborhood last month. I heard about what happened with the previous HOA president trying to commandeer your generator. That story still making the rounds?" I asked. "It comes up whenever someone talks about HOA history," James said. "I wanted to shake your hand. I think you did the right thing. Too many people just caved to pressure from petty tyrants. You stood your ground and it made things better for everyone." "I appreciate that," I said. "But honestly, I just wanted to protect my property and my family. Everything else kind of followed from that." "Sometimes doing the simple right thing leads to big changes," James said. "Anyway, I am on the welcoming committee now, and I wanted you to know that new residents hear your story as an example of good citizenship, not troublemaking." That conversation stayed with me. My reputation in the neighborhood had completely flipped from how Patricia had tried to paint me. Instead of being seen as the selfish guy who would not help the community, I was now seen as someone who stood up to unreasonable authority and did things the right way. Time has a way of revealing the truth. As the years went on, Hamilton Power Solutions continued to operate successfully. I never expanded beyond what I could manage comfortably while working my regular job. I did not want to turn it into a stressful empire. It remained what it had always been meant to be: a side business providing a valuable service while generating extra income. I rented to dozens of different HOAs, community groups, corporate clients, and private events. Every rental was professional, properly insured, and mutually beneficial. I built a reputation for reliability and fairness. Occasionally, I would run into someone who knew Patricia or had heard her version of events from years earlier. Their perspective would shift quickly once they heard the full story or worked with me professionally. Some people even apologized for having initially judged me based on her one-sided narrative. One interesting encounter happened about 4 years after everything began. I was at a generator supply store in Phoenix when I overheard a woman complaining loudly to the manager. "I need a backup generator for my community event next month," she was saying. "And I need your best price because this is for a nonprofit HOA." The manager politely explained their rental rates were standard and very competitive. "That is unacceptable," the woman said. "Do you know who I am?" "I represent over 200 homes. We could be a regular customer." Something about the voice was familiar. I glanced over and immediately recognized Patricia. She looked older, more tired, but it was definitely her. She had not seen me yet. The manager remained professional but firm. "Madam, I understand, but our rates are our rates. We treat all customers fairly." "This is ridiculous," Patricia said. "I should not have to pay full price for community service. The supplier in Prescott gives me a discount." "Then perhaps you should work with them," the manager suggested politely. Patricia huffed and turned to leave. As she did, she spotted me. Our eyes met. Recognition flashed across her face, followed by what looked like embarrassment, then anger. She quickly looked away and hurried out of the store without saying anything. The manager noticed the interaction. "You know her. We had a history a few years back," I said. "She tried to force me to let her use my generator for free." "Sounds about right," the manager said with a knowing look. "She has been in here 3 times, always demanding special treatment and discounts. Some people think the world owes them something." I completed my purchase and left, thinking about the encounter. Patricia had not changed. She was still trying to bully suppliers, still demanding special treatment, still convinced that her position entitled her to other people's property or services at reduced cost. But she had no power over me anymore, and apparently, she had learned that most people would not bend to that kind of pressure. The world had moved on without her. Back in Sunset Valley Estates, life continued peacefully. David served 2 terms as president before stepping down to let others lead. His successor, a retired teacher named Carolyn, continued his approach of reasonable leadership and mutual respect. The neighborhood thrived. Property values increased. Community events were well attended and enjoyable. Disputes were handled fairly. It turned out that when an HOA focused on actual community improvement rather than power games, everyone benefited. My relationship with the HOA became completely normal. I was just another resident who also happened to rent them equipment occasionally. No drama, no conflict, just straightforward business transactions. Rebecca and I celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary with a vacation to Hawaii, partially funded by the generator business income. As we sat on a beach in Maui, she raised her glass to toast. "To standing up to HOA tyrants and accidentally starting a business," she said with a laugh. "To unexpected consequences," I added. "You ever think about what would have happened if you had just given in to Patricia?" Rebecca asked. "Sometimes," I said. "I probably would have gotten the generator back damaged or with something broken. She would have kept asking for other things, and I would have been bitter about being pushed around. Instead, you stood firm, built a business, and helped make the neighborhood better," Rebecca said. "Not a bad outcome." "Not bad at all," I agreed. As our anniversary trip wound down and we headed back to Phoenix, I thought about the whole journey. It had started with a simple no, a refusal to be bullied into giving up my property. That single decision had rippled outward in ways I never could have anticipated. It led to conflict, yes, but it also led to change, opportunity, and ultimately a better community for everyone. Sometimes the right choice is not the easy choice. Sometimes standing firm on principle causes short-term pain but long-term gain. The generator that caused all the controversy still sits in my backyard when it is not out on rental. It is older now, with more hours on it, but still reliable and powerful. It has become more than just emergency equipment or rental income. It is a reminder that you can face down unreasonable demands and come out stronger. I have told this story to several people over the years, and reactions are always interesting. Some people think I should have just helped out my community to keep the peace. They see conflict as something to be avoided at all costs. Others immediately understand why I refused and support the stand I took. They have dealt with their own bullies and know that giving in only makes things worse. What I have learned is that reasonable people can disagree about tactics, but the principle remains the same. You have the right to your own property. HOAs have legitimate authority over certain things, but that authority has limits. When someone oversteps those limits, pushing back is not just acceptable, it is necessary. If I had to do it all over again, I would make the same choices. I would still refuse Patricia's demands. I would still rent to Riverside Meadows. I would still stand firm through the harassment and pressure. Because the alternative was submitting to unreasonable authority, and that path leads nowhere good. Years later, Hamilton Power Solutions is still operating. My equipment is booked regularly. My reputation is solid. And most importantly, I sleep well at night knowing I did not compromise my principles for an easy life. Patricia is somewhere in Prescott, probably still trying to push people around and demand special treatment. But that is not my problem anymore. She exists only as a cautionary tale in my neighborhood, a reminder of what happens when small authority goes to someone's head. Meanwhile, Sunset Valley Estates has become the kind of community I am proud to be part of. Good leadership makes all the difference. Reasonable rules fairly applied create harmony. Respect for property rights and personal boundaries allows people to live together peacefully. The generator still runs perfectly, ready for the next rental or the next emergency. But more than that, it stands as a symbol of a simple truth that applies far beyond HOA disputes. Your property is yours. Your rights matter. And standing up for those things, even when it is difficult, is always worth it. That $15,000 generator became the best investment I ever made, not just because it spawned a business, but because it taught me that I could face down intimidation and win. That is a lesson worth far more than money. As I write this, sitting in my home office with the Arizona sun setting outside my window, I can see the generator in the backyard through the window. Tomorrow, it is rented out for a corporate event in Tempe. Next week, it will be at a community festival in Gilbert. The following month, several weddings and parties. Each rental is a reminder that doing the right thing works out in the end. Each successful event powered by my equipment is proof that standing firm on principle does not mean being difficult or uncooperative. It means setting appropriate boundaries and requiring mutual respect. Patricia tried to take what was mine through intimidation and abuse of authority. I said no, faced the consequences, and came out the other side better off. That is how it should work in America. That is how communities should function. That is how people with integrity live their lives. The generator hums when it runs, a steady, powerful sound that represents reliability and strength. That sound has become the soundtrack to a side business. a neighborhood transformation, and a personal victory over petty tyranny. And it all started because I refused to hand over my property to someone who thought her title gave her the right to demand it. That refusal changed everything, and I have never regretted it for a single moment.